Welcome to Harem series of Naruto episode 18. Naruto with Tsume. At a nearby port, Naruto yawned a bit as he looked about to see the dock workers going at full tilt on getting the ship nearby fully ready for the soon-to-be-taken journey back to Konoha. The ship was currently in the Land of Seas as there was supposed to be a special mission that was being done by some of the ninja in Konoha. And for the moment, he had been assigned to work with another jonin in this case. The jonin was none other than Tsume Inuzuka, the mother of his friend Kiba and his sister Hana. He was surprised to be assigned for this mission, but since the other teams were too busy, he had to do it. Besides, instead of resisting the idea of having him come along, Tsume didn't seem to mind at all. He wondered about that until she told him that she was keen to see him in action when on this mission that they were having now. Apparently the mission was to hunt down the ones who created the basis for the biological agent that had turned Akamaru into the giant version of himself a few years back. Apparently Tsume was not the least bit happy about that, even that nearly killed her son and placed her eldest daughter at risk, so when the mission came up, she didn't hesitate to take it, and since she knew that he had helped in subduing Akamaru along with Hana and her daughter's dog familiars, she had asked him to help her in this mission. Kiba was currently on assignment with Hinata and Shino, while Kurenai had just returned to duty after recovering from childbirth, so he was not available, while Hana herself was on a mission since she was free of her duties as a vet. As for his team, Sakura was busy working with Tsunade on some new medical cases and making new cures and antidotes, while Kakashi was busy with Yamato and Sai and tracking the movements of both Orochimaru and Sasuke. This left him alone, and he had no other choice to agree with the mission since he had some desire to find out just how the virus was made so it would never be used by others ever again. They had managed to track down the origin of the virus and brought the maker to justice, though it had been a hard chase in that time, and in that time, he had begun to see just what made Kiba and Hana's mother a very capable ninja to be in the rank of jonin, and she was as fierce or even fiercer than Kiba himself. There was no doubt in his mind that she was very skilled, and that was something he respected. The blonde shook his head and decided to focus on other matters for the time being as he looked forward to heading back to Konoha to get some word on how they were going to find Sasuke. He hoped that Sakura would do all right and be stronger for the time that both of them would soon move out and find Sasuke. He then turned when he spotted a massive wolf-like creature which he recognized to be Tsume's familiar, and he turned to see the woman in question. "Naruto-san, is the ship ready yet?" "Almost. They are loading the last of the supplies right now." Tsume nodded, and she was itching to get back to Konoha after the successful mission to hunt down those men responsible for the virus that nearly cost her the life of her son and his familiar. She had to admit that Naruto's contributions to the mission were quite good, and she could see now why her children were welcoming of the blonde Jonin. Like all the elder ninja, she was familiar with Naruto's past as the Kyuubi's container or the Jinchuriki, and like others, she had a healthy respect and fear for the power of the Kyuubi. However, she had seen how different the boy was in real life, and had agreed that Naruto had outgrown the old view of him being a talentless clown. She also had to admit that he was going to be quite a handsome man when he was at the right age to be an adult. She smirked at that and decided not to show her thoughts as the two of them finally got their packs on their backs and headed onto the ship. The day was going to be long as the ship finally took off and was soon heading back to Konoha. It was going to be a long trip for the two of them, so they already had plans in order to pass the time. For Naruto, it was getting the chance to think about his favorite food as well as get the chance to be with his family and friends, and for Tsume, it was getting the chance to get back and take the time to relax while making sure that her family were doing all right and keeping up with the need to show the strength and ability of their family. The two had very different ideas on how to relax as Tsume began to focus on getting her familiar cleaned after the battle they had been in before. Naruto was currently relaxing in his room and decided to go out and get some food as well, so he decided to leave the room and go see what was on the menu of the ship at this time of the day, as it was already going to be lunch. He then decided to see if he can get anything for Tsume as well as her canine familiar. He knocked on the door and he waited for a response from Tsume. He was somewhat surprised that she was not answering his knocking on her door, so he tried once more. As soon as he didn't get a response, he was a bit worried and checked the door. He found it to be open and unlocked, but there were no sign of anyone tampering with it at the moment. With that in mind, he opened the door and looked into the room and was quite surprised to see that no one was in the room. He could have sworn that Tsume and her familiar were in the room when they had parted from one another only hours after they had boarded the ship. He then decided to speak once more. "Tsume-san? Are you in here?" He looked about, slowly entering the room, and it was when he was inside the room that he was able to meet the jonin who had decided to walk out of the bathroom and was fully clothed but apparently soaked by water. The blonde then spotted the canine familiar walk out of the bathroom with his fur somewhat soaked and drying out. Apparently the jonin had decided to give the massive wolf-like familiar a bath to clean him up and had gotten soaked in the process. The blonde gulped in that moment as he realized that since she had her clothes soaked by the water, the clothes would hug Tsume's frame well, and did so to show that despite the fact that Tsume was older than him, She was undeniably a full-blown woman who, due to being a ninja, was in peak physical condition and training, had a very healthy and powerful physique that was all woman to anyone's eyes, as the blonde found himself looking at her with considerable scrutiny. Naruto managed to recover as he realized that he was on a very serious situation and stopped looking at the jonin as he tried to explain just what exactly he was doing in her room uninvited by her for any reason. However, Tsume was quick to react before Naruto could say anything as she punched him in the face. Whack! Naruto moved back as he felt the pain on his cheek and looked at Tsume, who was angry at him and glaring as she spoke. "You want to explain to me why you're here in my room and looking at me like some pervert, Naruto-san?" The blonde then replied while making a pleading gesture to placate the angry woman, as he knew that in this case, he was the one at fault for walking in without waiting for a proper answer from the jonin. "I came here to ask if you were going to have something to eat now. I tried knocking on the doors but you didn't answer and I saw that the door was unlocked, so I thought that something had happened." Tsume looked at Naruto intently, trying to see if he was trying to lie to her, and when she saw that he was not lying to her in any fashion, she relaxed and had to admit that in her plans to give her familiar some needed bathing to get rid of the dirt and grime, she had forgotten to lock the door to her room, and the fact that she had been in the bathroom to give the bath in the first place had also kept her from hearing Naruto's knocking on her door. With that train of thought in her head, the jonin relaxed and moved away from Naruto and spoke to him. "Alright, but next time, make sure to remember that you don't just barge into a room. You're lucky that you and I are not enemies, otherwise things here would have been far more violent." Naruto nodded at the truth in that statement and spoke to her. "I understand, Tsume-san." As the two relaxed and Tsume went back into drying the hair of her familiar and she then told Naruto to wait for her outside, the blonde naturally followed the command as he was not in the mood to court Tsume's temper for the time being, so he left the room and decided to wait outside. He could already feel the chakra of the Kyuubi healing his injury quickly, though he had to admit that Tsume can really throw a punch fast and hard. Though he had to admit that despite being old enough to be his mother, she was rather attractive, and seeing her in those wet clothes seemed to make him a bit more. The very second those thoughts began to worm their way into his head, the blonde genin shook his head to try and get them out of his brain. The last thing her wanted were such thoughts in his head. He might have some perverted tendencies, but thinking of Akiba and Hana's mother like that was going to get him into some serious trouble if either of them found out about. He didn't even want to guess what would happen if Tsume herself found out about the direction of his thoughts in this moment. "What the heck am I thinking? That's the mother of my friend Kiba, for crying out loud." However, the Kyuubi was more than ready and willing to get involved with the whole situation as it finally made itself present to the blonde who was its jailer. "Well now, are you attracted to that woman, kid?" "Shut up. I am not thinking such things, you perverted fox." "Really now, why do I have my doubts on that matter? Besides, you do have to admit that she is rather attractive after all." Naruto knew that the Kyuubi spoke the truth in that regard, but he was not keen on continuing this line of conversation with his resident and did so as he spoke to the Kyuubi. "I am well aware of that, but I am ending this line of conversation right now." The Kyuubi however chuckled at that and replied, "Alright, but I have a feeling that we're probably going to have another conversation like it in the near future." Naruto shook his head and turned to see Tsume come out of her room, wearing another set of clothes that were the same as the ones she wore, but these were naturally dry clothes and she was wearing her vest this time. The woman gave him a stare that was neither happy nor threatening, and she then spoke to him. "Let's make sure not to let that happen again, Naruto-kun. Alright?" "Hi, so what do you plan to do now, Tsume-san?" Tsume thought it over and shrugged her shoulders and replied, "Not much at the moment, maybe get some much needed sleep since it will be a while before we get back to Konoha at this point. However, I am a bit hungry for the moment, so let's go and get something to eat." They were soon joined by the canine familiar and they were soon in the galley. They headed to the bar and Tsume ordered her food and that of her canine companion while Naruto did the same. Some of the patrons however were not happy with the wolf-like familiar of Tsume and their sour looks were directed at the creature. They however kept their thoughts to themselves as they knew that the three were ninjas from Konoha due to the forehead protectors they had on. However, as Tsume and Naruto got down to their tables and were brought their meals, several drunken men walked over and spoke to the woman. "Hey, no dogs of any kind are allowed here." Tsume glared at the man and replied, "This is my familiar, you drunk. Unless you plan on fighting sober, I suggest you go soak your head and cool off. I am not in the mood to be disturbed by the likes of you and your gang of whelps." The man naturally was not the least bit happy at that, as he made that very clear to both Tsume and Naruto, while the familiar growled darkly at the man daring to attack its master. "I don't care about that lady. If that's your dog, then have it leave this place. The galley is not the place for flea-bitten mutts like it." Tsume growled, but she was not in the mood to waste her energies on attacking a bunch of drunks and decided to give the drunkard one more chance to leave with his life and his pride intact. Though considering the sheer amount of alcohol she could smell in the man's breath and from the way he was moving, She wasn't going to hold her breath on the matter. "That flea-bitten mutt you happen to be referring to is a wolf and is quite intelligent enough to know what you're yapping, and Kuromaru is getting very annoyed with you, and so am I. My name is Tsume Inuzuka and Konoha. I'm the matriarch of the Inuzuka clan, so if you plan on living a lot longer, I suggest you back away before I and Kuromaru get down to beating the holy hell out of you." The man glared and was about to do something when the others topped him. Apparently they were not that drunk and recognized that continuing to antagonize her over her familiar was not going to be good for them. It was not long before they finally lugged their companion away, but the man apparently was not the kind of person to adhere to the age-old wisdom of let sleeping dogs lie as he spoke out. "Humph. I heard of that clan and that woman, couldn't hold on to her husband, maybe she's more into animal companionship or something." That was more than enough to enrage Tsume, and she got up and was about to attack the man when she noted that Naruto was no longer in the table and she was briefly concerned on where he had gone. She got her answer when the man was suddenly punched hard and sent flying through the air and smashed through several tables, and the others gasped. Tsume looked to see the attacker to be none other than Naruto himself, and he was irate. She then noted that the blonde's once deep blue eyes had turned red and had slits in the middle, showing that the blonde had allowed the Kyuubi to take control of the blonde Junon. She was shocked at that, as well as noticing that Naruto's whisker marks had changed somewhat and his canines began sharper and more pronounced as he gritted his teeth. Naruto was angry, that much she could see, and she realized that she might have to do something to prevent Naruto from doing something bad, though she suddenly felt something in her body when she looked at Naruto, who was still using the power of the Kyuubi. The blonde knew that using the chakra of the Kyuubi on someone like this drunkard was overkill, but he couldn't help himself. The very second he heard that comment from the man concerning Tsume, he just snapped. He had never known his parents at all since he was born an orphan, so had no family to speak of. But even though he had never been with any parents, he knew how important it was to a family. Hinata and her family were getting along well, and so did his other friends with their family, and he had a mother figure in Tsunade, and even though he would never show it, he cared for Jiraiya as a master. There was no doubt he saw Kakashi as a big brother fire and Iruka as his father figure, showing that he had a good family, and naturally he would never tolerate any insult directed to family members. The insult hurled at Tsume was so disgusting and vile that it deserved to be answered, and he answered it well enough. He knew that if they were here, Hana and Kiba along with their respective canine familiars would have done far worse than him at this moment, and he knew that Tsume was more than able to take care of herself and would have done a great deal of damage to the man. By all rights Tsume should have done this instead of him, since it was her family and her preferences that were being reviled, but he couldn't stop himself, and since Tsume didn't stop him, he decided to deal with the pest as he quickly moved towards the man. He was not stopped by the man's friends, as they too saw the way he looked at the moment. Naruto growled in an utterly feral fashion as he lifted the man and growled at him. The punch from the blonde apparently had finally awakened the man from his heavily drunk state better than the tonics normally used to cure hangovers. As soon as he lifted the man, he growled while his teeth were still shown as he spoke. "Listen here, if you want to keep living, then I suggest you apologize to Tsume-san before I beat you to a bloody pulp." The man glared, and that was enough to make Naruto follow through with a fierce punch that hit square in the gut. The man cried out as he felt himself being hit by the force of a sledgehammer crushing an egg. The man groaned in pain, but Naruto merely held him up and, still looking in feral anger at the man as he spoke once more. "One more time, apologize to the lady or else the next punch is right in your face." That was enough for the man to finally get the hint as he finally spoke. Sorry. Naruto however growled once more as he then slammed the man face first into the table nearby while changing his grip to now having one hand behind the man's head and another fist ready and aimed at the man's back, aimed right at the kidneys. Apparently Naruto had picked up some taijutsu tips from Jiraiya during his training trip. "No, not like that, you scum. You say her name and apologize for ever making that remark about her and her family." The man did as Naruto asked, and this time the blonde seemed satisfied and moved away while tossing the man to his fellows, and he growled at them in a very angry fashion as he spoke, also targeting the others in the galley itself. "Get your friend out of here, and he had better not show his ugly face in front of me ever again, or the next time I see him, I will beat him to the ground. And if any of you have issues with Tsume-san's familiar being here, then I suggest you keep it to yourselves, lest I do the same to you." The men nodded and quickly left the area. Naruto glared at them while making sure to look in a very menacing fashion at all the others who he knew disapproved of Tsume and Kuromaru, daring them to try something. They all got the message and things began to settle down. As soon as Naruto calmed down, he felt the Kyuubi's chakra recede back into his body and he felt his body change back to normal. As soon as he turned to face Tsume, he was greeted by a glare by the Inuzuka matriarch, and he was surprised as to why she was angry at him, and she made it clear when she spoke to him. "I could have handled that myself, Naruto. Why did you interfere? Naruto was not happy with that, as he had hoped that Tsume at least appreciated his actions in defending her honor and that of her clan, but he kept his peace and replied, "I couldn't just stand by and let that scum's words slide. No one, especially a mother, deserves to be insulted in such a fashion." Tsume looked at Naruto seriously for a few more minutes, and after a few tense moments between the two ninja, the special Jonin relaxed and nodded at Naruto as she replied, "Alright, but next time, Naruto, if ever this happens, I'll deal with it myself. Don't try to do anything for me that I can do for myself, understand?" Hi. As the meal arrived, the two of them ate their food and drank well while Kuromaru ate his food, as the galley seemed to be in a more relaxed setting. Once the ruckus was settled, the captain naturally came in and asked for answers on what had happened on his ship. Tsume explained it, and so did some of the witnesses, and with that out of the way, they got back to their meal. All the while Tsume was busy looking at Naruto, her mind still trying to wrap itself around what she had just seen recently. She had just seen the Kyuubi take over Naruto for a brief moment, though it seemed that Naruto had not lost control of himself when the Kyuubi's chakra had taken over him. It seemed that the blonde had been developing his ability to control the Kyuubi's chakra and limit its influence on his mind and personality. Like all the older Jonin, she was well aware of Naruto's hidden secret of being the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki or container, but unlike the villagers, she was not like those who hated the young child. She did have a healthy amount of fear of the Kyuubi, but not Naruto himself. He was not an evil youth and was just a regular young man, as she had known that he and her son used to skip school together. He was also rather good looking now that he had matured. Tsume was a woman after all, despite her fierce demeanor, and she did appreciate the male form a good deal. Though she knew for a fact that her fierce nature had been the reason she had lost her husband, and the father of both her children, she didn't mind at all, as she had done all she could to raise them well into adulthood. She felt great care and pride for both her daughter and young son. And she had very much been by herself, and it suited her fine. Though she longed for male companionship every now and then, she focused on her duties to avoid thinking of it for the moment. She however couldn't help but feel something stir in her when she saw Naruto being that fierce looking. In some ways he resembled in some ways her clan, though that was only through the influence of the Kyuubi itself. He seemed to release an aura that hinted at danger and power. Most people would be frightened by the sight, but for some reason the Inuzuka clan matriarch found the whole sight of it to be rather exciting. Tsume then managed to keep her thoughts from going that far as they ate their food. Once they were done, the pair decided to go and get some much-needed time off, as it was still in the afternoon at this day. However, they had a feeling that things were going to get interesting soon enough. As they rested in their rooms, they were suddenly shocked as the boat seemed to shudder from some sort of impact that really was bad news to them. They quickly got out of their rooms to find out what was happening, and they got their answer when they got on the deck itself. Saw smoke coming out from one side of the ship. They managed to find out that someone had accidentally set off a fire and had entered the stores of the end. It seemed that some of the cargo was used for fireworks making. That was what created the explosion that they heard. The ship was a lost cause, and thus the people began to get into the lifeboats. Both ninja did their best to help the passengers, and they soon moved out as they sent a lifeboat down to the sea and quickly got on board with Kuromaru riding with them. Naruto quickly moved the boat out of the way as the night fell on them, despite the sheer amount of light from the fireworks that were going off. The blonde moved further through the darkening ocean, and the sounds of thunder told him that there might be a storm coming soon. That was the one thing that terrified the blonde, as he had heard stories about the terrifying effects of people being trapped in the ocean in the middle of a storm. He knew that it was going to be a long trip, as the two of them moved a good deal out of the area and soon lost sight of their former ride. It was then that Tsume smelled the air alongside Kuromaru. The two continued to smell the air until Tsume spoke to Naruto in a very serious tone. "There's the smell of rain coming this way." "Not good, man. I wish there was an island around here." Tsume however replied with some good news. "There's one at least a few hours east from here. I picked up the smell of some plants that are found on land masses that way. We need to move there soon before the storm hits us." Naruto decided not to question the Inuzuka clan matriarch on the validity of her sense of smell. He knew that doing so was not going to help them at all. Besides that, he knew that her sense of smell was a lot stronger than his, so he would have to chance it at this point. The blonde guided the ship in the direction that Tsume pointed out, and as they moved about, the blonde was happy to see the outline of some mountains in there before them and the expanse of land there, showing that they were indeed closing in on the island. However, that was damped literally by the arrival of the storm. The two were soon soaked by the rain, and the flashes of lightning were certainly not helping, as Naruto knew that if they took a direct hit from even a glancing bolt, they were done for. That was why he did his best to reach the island, though they had to be careful as there were large rocks that there before them, and they had to be careful in avoiding those in order to avoid sinking their ship. It took a lot of work for the blonde to do the maneuvering, and as soon as they were on the beach, the two got the ship out. They quickly looked for a place to hide from the storm and away from the lightning, and found it in a nearby outcropping of rock. They were able to avoid the rain and the lightning for the time being, but it was cold for them as the wind chilled their bodies due to the wetness of their clothing and the cold wine itself. Boom! The sounds of a massive lightning bolt hitting a nearby tree shocked them as the tree was suddenly turned into a burning torch and fell apart just as the rain finally stopped and only the wind was blowing. The sight of a fire was more than enough to get their attention, and Naruto decided to risk it as he summoned a pair of Kage Bushin and moved to get the burning branches despite the dangers and dragged them to the outcropping. Naruto was still shivering from the cloud, but the fire he brought from the burning tree was enough to warm his spirits as well as that of Tsume. The elder Inuzuka wanted to berate the blonde for the huge risk he took despite the results of getting them a warm fire for the night, but she was tired and needed sleep as well as time to warm herself up. And she could see that the same was true for Naruto, so the two of them decided to do what they can and get some sleep for tonight since they were going to need all the energy that they could get for the soon-to-come morning. The next day, Naruto woke up and began to get some feeling back in his body after the long and somewhat fitful sleep that he had last night. He looked about and saw that Tsume was still sleeping, and the same could be said with her familiar, and since they were still sleeping, the blonde decided to let them rest for as long as possible as he moved out of the cave near the beach that they had been able to land in. He looked to see a number of trees nearby and saw them to be coconuts, and it was here that the Kyuubi spoke to him once more. "Nice to see you wide awake, Kit. It's time to go and grab something good to eat since we are going to need all the energy we can get for this day." "But what about Tsume-san?" "Kit, she'll be fine. She's a Jonin and a member of the Inuzuka clan, and that familiar of hers will be more than able to handle the job of protecting its mistress. Come on. It's time to go and see if we can get some much-needed supplies for food." The blonde nodded mentally as he knew that the Kyuubi was right in that regard, and they decided to head off to see just what sort of animals and plants that they would need for food in this place as well as water if it can be found. As the two of them moved about to locate the things they needed, the Kyuubi spotted a large moving river that was coming out from some nearby trees and spoke to the blonde Jinan. As soon as they got there, the blonde drank some of the water and it was cool and fresh to the taste, certainly a welcome thing since he had learned how bad it was to drink salt water. He moved on and then stopped as he spotted what appeared to be a large herd of cows, that told him that something was a bit off in this place, and he followed them to a nearby house that seemed to be abandoned. This was enough to surprise the blonde as he looked at the sight before him. He then rushed to see if there was anything there that could help, but apart from some furniture that was starting to rot, there was not much there to help with, but he found some spear knives and rope that could be useful. He checked the house and found nothing else, and then the Kyuubi spoke to him. "I guess now is the right time to go and kill one of them cows?" "What for?" "That's a rather dumb question, you kid. Simple, for meat and the skin. Milk can come from the others. Take on one of the younger ones, the meat's more tender and easier on the digestive system. And you know this." "How?" "Listen, less questions and more action. You need food, kid, so hustle to it." Naruto sighed at that and decided to go to it and begin to track down one of the calves. Thankfully the one he managed to rein in was quickly killed, and he was not being attacked by the other cows as he had managed to kill it quietly. It was rather distasteful to him with all the skinning part and cutting up the meat, but it had to be done either way. Thankfully there was a nearby river that was feeding the cow herd's drinking area, so he managed to clean himself up, though he had no doubt that he was going to smell for a while once that was over. As soon as he was done washing up, he managed to look back into the house and thankfully found a large tarp that could be useful in hauling away the meat he had gotten. He also found a large number of wild-growing fruit trees there. There were apples, oranges, pears, and bananas. With that in mind, he was quick to gather as much as he could take with him. As soon as he was done for his foraging run, he headed back to camp, but not before the Kyuubi told him to go a nearby fallen tree that the blonde recognized as a pine tree. "What are we doing here with this tree anyway?" "This tree happens to be pine, and pine resin is very flammable. You could soak it in water and it will still burn, and that will certainly be worth taking. Now let's get what we can and get a fire going." The blonde did that as he took several branches as well as the sap from the tree and took them with him. Once he got back, he took some of the meat and handed it to Kuromaru, hoping that the wolf-like familiar would be all right with the food that he was giving him at this moment. Kuromaru growled in appreciation and took the meat just as Tsume woke up, and the Jonin quickly assisted the blonde in getting their breakfast ready. The two roasted the meat on the fire that was now cooking away, and the smell was more than enough to help them relax even more. The fire also helped their spirits as it was a bit cold in the morning. As soon as they had their breakfast of meat and fruit, the blonde Jinan told Tsume of the house he had seen, and that was more than enough for Tsume to feel some level of relief. She knew that while one house that was abandoned was not much to begin with, the house meant that there were people who lived on the island before, so they might have left things behind that would be of use to them. Considering what Naruto had found already, they moved out to find what they could on the island, and it was not that long before they found the other signs of human habitation. There were some discarded tools and some rotting wooden crates, old fencing and also old roads. Apparently there was some considerable construction on this island before, so there was indeed humans here before. The herd of cows was a good indication at that. It didn't take long for the trio to find a compound with a high wall nearby that showed its age as well as several unfinished sections. As the three entered the compound, they found several houses and sheds. Some were ruined and showing age and others appeared to have been half constructed and just left there to rot. Naruto looked the place over carefully and spoke. "What happened here? I have no idea, though I can bet that maybe we can find answers about that in the ruins. In the meantime, we can use this place as a camp to rest in. At least here we can use the already present buildings as resting spots, and if there's anything we can use, we can find it here." Naruto agreed and decided to help Tsume as they went to work. One thing was certain. It was going to be a very long day. At night, the days turned to weeks for the two as they focused their efforts in making life on the island comfortable and livable for themselves while doing whatever they could in order to be rescued by passing ships. The two had been able to make several signal fires and with the salvaged small pocket mirrors, would be able to signal ships if their signal fires were somehow made moist and were not going to be of much use for making smoke. The signal fires were well placed in high places in the island and were in easy reach of the pair due to them being ninjas, so they were alright, and they usually made trips to get fuel there to keep the fires ready. They were able to determine that the island was very large and would be a great site for a village, and the signs of initial construction attempts proved that to be true. They decided to turn the place into a home base for which to rest in and stay for the time being. There was no power in any facilities of the sort, but that was not much of an issue. They learned that since funding for the island had been cut, then the place had been left behind. This gave them more than a chance to set up in a halfway finished area, thus saving them time and energy in having a place built from scratch. They found a fairly well-built house that was made from both wood and concrete and had the foundations for the roof, but since the place had been left behind by the workers and there were plenty of supplies left behind, they were able to make do with what they had. They managed to get several planks to form the roof while also using a combination of rope, hard vines, nails and a good deal of pitch from a nearby swamp pit to seal up the house. There were windows already, so they didn't have to worry too much about air circulation in the place. They also found a good number of things that would make life a lot more bearable: kitchen tools like pans, pots, cups, plates, knives, and the like. There were also some well-preserved and useful boxes holding nails, extra rope, cloth sheets, pillows and some mattresses, more than welcomed by the two of them, though they made the main hall of the house into the sleeping area while the outside yard served as the place for cooking. As the house only had that feature as the other rooms had been damaged or incomplete. They also decided to tighten the walls around the compound in order to make it less likely that wild animals would get the bright idea of trying to come into the compound that they had converted into their place of residence until they were able to be rescued. The compound also had a port that had some leftover fishing boats. Many were not worthy for a long trip out into the ocean, and there were no larger ships there as well. However, there were some ships that were good for catching fish and other seafood that would help them have a more varied diet. They also made sure to set up signal fires on the large rocky outcroppings outside of the compound. The three of them had been able to find plenty to eat in the right places. The place might have been abandoned, but there were a number of records that told them what the people who had once resided here had brought with them: more than enough vegetables, fruits, and livestock to work with the native plants and animals that were already residing on the island itself. There were chickens, ducks, cows, goats, sheep, and pigs that were held in farms on the island, but since the people had left the island, they had began to roam the areas near their farms, though there were naturally other animals that they were able to find. There were rabbits, wild chickens, some wild pigs, snakes, and the like, as well as the fruits that were there on the island and the wild herbs. This gave them more than enough food on which to live on. There was also a large well in the area that was connected to an underground wellspring of fresh water that gave them water to drink, cook food with, wash things and the like as well. This place would have made a swell place to live considering the location and terrain, but they were unable to find any records on what was the reason the place was left behind and left half constructed and abandoned. However, they were able to make the most of their time on the island. There was a lake that was fed by a nearby river that served also to bathe in. Naturally, they did their best to keep to one another, though it was harder for Tsume as she was dealing with what she had seen. The time she had seen Naruto using the power of the Kyuubi in her defense was rather exciting to her, and the fact that Naruto was a good-looking man added to that. The changes seemed so feral and masculine that the older Inuzuka couldn't help but attracted to the young man. An incident when she had been able to see him bathing added to that as well. She had just gotten back after catching some new rabbit meat with Kuromaru to make some stew for the night, as well as some roasts for Naruto and Kuromaru. At that moment, She looked to see Naruto taking a bath in the lake, and it seemed that the blonde Jinan was so engrossed by the time he was spending to clean up that he was not aware that he was being studied by the Inuzuka matriarch. The fact that he was nearly naked and only had a towel covering his crotch was more than enough to get a very heated rise out of the Jonin as she looked at the blonde Jinan as he continued to bathe. She studied him despite the distance and found him to be very delicious to look at. However, the moment didn't last all that long. Since Naruto had now cleaned himself up, the Jonin was left to recall the images she had just seen. The rest of the day she was watching Naruto and couldn't get the image out of her mind of the young man like that, no matter how brief it was in the first place, and it was getting difficult. As for Naruto, he had to admit that being on an island with Tsume was also hard on him as a young man. He had begun to find some level of attraction to Tsume despite the fact that he was doing everything in his power not to think of those things. It was wrong and also very bad to think of a woman who was the mother of his best friend. Though in his case, the Kyuubi was less than helpful in that regard, as well as it was needling him like in the time back on the ship. And naturally his perverted side was coming up with some vivid images, which was why he did his best to stay on Tsume's good side and not get into trouble with her, since she was not the kind of person in his mind to be interested in a young man old enough to be her son. Which was true since both he and Kiba were the exact age, so despite his perverted thoughts filtering in every now and then, he did his best to not show it. Of course that didn't mean that his attempts were foolproof. He could manage to disguise his thoughts, and Tsume was not a mind reader. However, she had other means, as she had a very accurate sense of smell, far beyond that of Naruto's, unless he was using the chakra of the Kyuubi to enhance his senses. When any person was aroused, they usually release a certain amount of pheromones, and while hard to smell if it was coming from one person, to the Inuzuka matriarch, it was like looking at a simple map. She could already tell that Naruto was attracted to her, though she could tell that he was trying to resist. But even if he did hide it well enough, his body wasn't being cooperative in the sense of smell. Tsume was naturally amused by the way Naruto was trying to hide his perverted thoughts from her, and while she could understand why he was being wary and doing his best to keep it hidden, his body's pheromones were doing the opposite and broadcasting it far and wide. This only served to excite her a considerable deal, though she tempered it with her own moral compass, and that was that she would prefer that her partner was willing, and as such she was going to have her chance to have her way with Naruto. And it was going to be this very night, as they were resting on the island in what was going to be their third month in the island itself. As they ate their food this night in the courtyard and were brushing up, the dark-haired Jonin decided to finally spring her trap on the young blonde Jinan. "Naruto-kun, I need to ask you something." Naruto turned and looked questioningly at Tsume, and the Jonin decided to speak. "Why is it you seem to have developed some form of tension around me for the past few days? I noticed you've been trying your hardest to stay on my good side. Is there something you've been trying to avoid me figuring out or something?" Naruto shook his head quickly, a little too quickly, to Tsume, showing that he indeed was trying to hide something from her. Fat chance of that working, however, since she had a very accurate idea on what that said thing was. She then replied, "Really? You don't have any problems at all with being stuck on an island all by yourself with a woman on it with you?" "No. I'm fine with the whole thing. Besides, we're going to be found soon enough. I have no doubt that Tsunade Obasan is still looking for us." Tsume nodded at that and replied, "Good, though I still think that you're hiding something from me, Naruto-kun. You want me to try and guess what it is?" Naruto had no idea what to do in this kind of situation, and he wished that he could say something that would help him avoid a possible confrontation with the woman. But he managed to hold on and try his best to figure out on what to say to Tsume that would get him to relax. Alright." Tsume smirked a bit more and decided to go for it. "You've been developing some attraction to a woman already, and you've been developing perverted thoughts towards said woman, and I can wager a guess that woman is me, since I'm the only woman on the island at the moment, right?" Naruto gulped a bit more and tried to deny it, but then Tsume replied, "You might try to say no, but your body says yes to me. After all, I can smell the truth out of you." "Huh?" Tsume snorted and replied, "I'm a member of the Inuzuka clan, Naruto. I naturally can smell things far better than most ninja, and your body is releasing enough pheromones to tell me you do have some perverted thoughts towards someone, and since we're the only humans here and you have been doing your absolute best to stay on my good side for the past few weeks, that kind of tells me a lot already. So, are you going to deny it?" Naruto gulped and blushed deeply and replied, No. Tsume smirked a bit more and nodded. "Good, better you be honest with me. And I can guess that the reason you've tried to suppress all of it is that you think that I would be angry and think of you as nothing but a pervert, right?" Naruto didn't answer, since it was true in some ways, and so he braced himself for the fight, but got a surprise when Tsume began to laugh and he looked at her as she seemed to be enjoying herself. The Jonin laughed a lot more until she spoke to Naruto. "You really ought to learn to relax a little bit more. It's fairly common for some young men to develop some level of attraction to older women, so I don't see what is wrong about that. You're just going through a natural phase of your youth and I can bet that you will get used to it very soon as you yourself grow older. Naruto. Naruto began to relax and Tsume then spoke to Naruto. However, I will tell you one thing, I do happen to have a very fierce streak in me, so it is true that I frightened away my husband before, and I do like having male company once in a while. And since we're the only people on the island, I guess I can let it slide. That was not what Naruto expected to say the very least, and he made that sentiment very clear on his next answer. What? You heard me, Naruto-kun. You want to do those things in your mind with me? Then go ahead, because I happen to be interested in doing those things to you too and a few of my own as well. But. No buts, Naruto-kun. I am a fully grown woman and I have already been intimate with men in the past, so I don't have any problems with it. Besides, it would do both of us some good since it would help relieve the tension between us for the past few weeks, and at least in this way, it would be good for both of us since it's far more pleasurable than us getting angry at some point and going at each other's throats. But I can't do that. Oh? I know your reasons, but like I said, I am a strong woman, and when I want something, or in this case someone, then I don't wait around to get it, or in this case him. Besides, I am consenting to it and not denying it either. So would you like to start things off? Or should I? The blushing blonde couldn't find any way to reply to that question, and Tsume could see that as well, and so she decided to make the first move. After all, women had to sometimes make the move first when the men were not that eager or too shy or frightened. But before she did so, she spoke in a gentler fashion to Naruto. Don't think I'm doing this just for kicks, Naruto-kun. I would never do this if I didn't want this, and certainly not with anyone right off the bat. This happens to be the first time in over 18 years since I've been with a man, and that is a long time for any woman. I might have frightened my husband away, but I still am happy for having Hana at 18 and Kiba at 21. So I have no regrets in what we are about to do if you want to go for it. Naruto looked at Tsume and could tell that she meant it, and gulped as he considered his options, and after some time he decided that since they had gone this far now, there was no turning back, and nodded to Tsume, making her smile as she leaned over to him and spoke once more. Good, I'll do my best to show you just how much fun and pleasure it is to be with a woman. And besides, I am an experienced woman already, so I can help you in anything in that regard. And one more thing, I saw you transform into the QB back there on that ship months before, but I was not frightened. You're not? No, actually, I was excited by it all. You looked very delicious to me in that moment, and when I saw you bathing here, so you've really made me happy that you agreed to do this. No more words, Naruto-kun. Time for action. Konoha. Tsunade sighed as she looked over the maps to help her find a possible place where they would be able to find both Tsume and Naruto. She hoped deeply that the two were fine and would be able to survive together until they were located. They were unable to send out any ships to find them due to the fact that several large storms had been hitting the seas for a while now, and there was not enough of an open window to allow them to do the things they needed to do in order to rescue both Naruto and Tsume as well as Tsume's familiar. The only good news was that Akatsuki had remained silent since there had been no sign of Naruto anywhere in the 5 countries, so they very much decided to keep their activities to a bare minimum, and that was a good thing in the sense that this gave all the villages and theirs in particular enough time to gather more information and tighten their defenses and security. She was unable to go on the search for Naruto since she was needed here in Konoha as Hokage, and as such, she had her hands tied up in paperwork. A team was being assembled at the moment to try and find Naruto, though it had to be deep secrecy in order to avoid attracting the attention of Akatsuki. The team was naturally Jiraiya, Kakashi, Sakura, and Sai, while the others were busy with their other duties, so they were the only ones willing to take the risk. Hinata wanted to come along, but she was currently on a mission with her team and as such was not present for the mission. The group had already left, and as she looked over the report, she hoped that Tsume and Naruto were getting along well enough together. She only hoped that Naruto didn't do too many things to get on Tsume's bad side, as she knew Tsume's personality of being the tough and serious woman who had a fierce and independent streak. She knew that she had a temper herself in most cases, though she usually gives most people a chance to avoid a beating. Tsume on the other hand was more than willing to let loose when given the chance on the offender, and with the love for battle that her clan had, Tsume was not someone to get on the bad side of. She could only hope that both Tsume and Naruto were doing something that would allow them to relax in each other's company. If she only knew just what was happening at the moment on the island in question. Lemon time. Naruto didn't have time to react as Tsume kissed him deeply. The elder woman was more than willing to go at Naruto on full throttle as the kiss quickly became a lot more heated between them. The blonde finally managed to get some semblance of control into himself as he began to kiss Tsume back with growing fervor, and this was much to Tsume's own relief, as she was a bit worried that he was being a bit too fierce in kissing the blonde Jinan before him. As Naruto soon began to get some courage in kissing the fierce but compassionate elder woman, the kiss between the two of them began to grow deeper. This was what Tsume was waiting for, as she then used her tongue to make Naruto open his mouth a bit more for her to make her move. Naruto opened his mouth slowly, allowing Tsume to lick his teeth as well as the inner areas of her young lover's lips. Naruto couldn't help but feel a bit odd and somewhat intimidated by the way Tsume was kissing him. However, he couldn't help but be aroused by the way she was going at this with him. He couldn't help but respond to Tsume's actions as he opened his mouth a lot more, and the very moment he did that action, Tsume was more than ready to take full advantage of it as she moved her tongue into his mouth. That was more than enough to surprise the blonde Junon as Tsume aggressively moved her tongue into his mouth. He couldn't help but respond. Despite the fact that this was the first time he had ever done this before, it seemed that his body was now reacting in a very instinctual fashion as he also used his tongue on Tsume's own tongue. He couldn't help but feel his body react to the taste of the older woman before him. It seems Naruto-kun is responding nicely, a bit clumsy, but not bad. Tsume relished this as she continued to kiss the blonde Junon deeply. While she knew that what she was doing would be considered as criminal due to the age difference between her and Naruto, she knew that by ninja law, Naruto was already an adult, the same way her own son Kiba is seen as now. Besides, she was already a high-ranking ninja as well as a mature woman, so she didn't have to worry too much about it. Though she naturally knew that she would have to be able to explain this series of events to Tsunade as soon as she and Naruto got back to Konoha at some point, as there was no doubt in her mind that Tsunade would take offense if this was kept from her. She was well aware of the relationship between Naruto and their Hokage, as despite bickering from time to time, the Hokage and the last of the Senju clan considered Naruto as a little brother, or in most cases, a son, and while he might not have shown it before, she knew Naruto saw Tsunade as a mother or grandmother of sorts. And there was the fact that Tsunade changed due to him as well, so the Hokage had very high hopes for the young man. That would mean that Tsunade would find out about this. She was not going to be pleased. The Jonin however replaced that situation for later. She had more pressing matters at hand. She moved her hands to Naruto's leather shirt that she made for him to wear when they had to keep their regular clothes clean and undamaged. She wasted no time in removing the knots on the laces. As soon as she was done, she was able to render Naruto naked as she moved away to look at him. Tsume licked her lips a bit as she gazed at the young man before him. He was perfect in form, as there was no sign on any baby fat on his form at all. Most of the said fat was lost due to his training under the Sannin Jiraiya as well as his own growth spurt. Naruto's body was well muscles and balanced in form, making the older woman feel all the more aroused as she ran her hands on him, getting used to feeling his skin as well as his hard and hot flesh. She knew that due to the Kyuubi being inside of him, the blonde would be able to heal up quickly, so she was not surprised to find that he had no scars on his body to show any injury. That was something that she had to respect, as a ninja who could recover in a much faster rate than regular ninja was a welcome sight on the battlefield, and that also told her that he would have great stamina. She had been told about Naruto's near-boundless energy as well as his very high levels of chakra, both from his own reserves to the one that he could access from the Kyuubi itself. This meant that he was going to be quite the handful for her. Just the way she liked it. Naruto gulped a bit as Tsume continued to touch his body with her hands, all the while, having this smile on her face that was rather intimidating to him. However, she had not done anything bad, so he managed to relax at some degree as she continued to run her hands on his body. Her touch was strong as well as a bit rough. However, she moved slowly so he was not in discomfort. He couldn't help but moan a bit as she touched his chest and stomach. As soon as she was done with her hand explorations, the elder Jonin spoke. "You really built yourself up, Naruto-kun. I guess training with Jiraiya-sama paid off, huh?" "I guess." "Don't be like that. You have a great body, Naruto-kun. You have the muscles in all the right places. You don't look the least bit bulky, no fat anywhere, your muscles are hard and well-toned. And of course, you are quite the handsome one." Naruto could tell that Tsume meant it, and for some reason, he found it to be rather comforting that she was telling him these things. "Thanks, Tsume-san." The Jonin grinned as she decided to carry on with her plans. Only this time she was going to have to remove Naruto of his clothing soon. It would be bad if she was only going to be limited to seeing the upper half of her lover's body, despite how delicious the sight of it exposed half was. However, she decided to really get a good taste and feel of the blonde Junon before finally stripping him completely naked. She started by kissing and licking his neck slowly, making Naruto moan out a bit more at the actions being taken by the elder woman. He wanted to touch her, to taste her, to make her cry out in the same way that she was already making him cry out. However, he kept in mind that Tsume was not someone who could be bossed around. If she wanted to let him touch her, she would tell him and not before. The Jonin moved to his chest, gently kissing and licking his skin while also running her hands on his body. The blonde Junon moaned as Tsume reached his own nipples as she licked them as well as gently bite them. Tsume was no expert in torture like her fellow Jonin, Anko, but she was no stranger to knowing how to mix pleasure with some small pain. which was what she was now doing to Naruto. But she also made sure to be gentle with the blonde as she wanted this night to be rather special to him. Tsume moved down to his chest while still kissing, licking and gently biting his body, making the blonde hiss at her actions. The Jonin could tell that Naruto wanted desperately to touch her as well as kiss her, along with all the other things that she was doing to him. She however wanted Naruto to be under her control for a bit more before she would let him have his turn. "Relax Naruto-kun, let me have my fun, and if you behave for me, I'll let you have your turn." Hi! Tsume grinned at that as she then moved her hands to the area where Naruto's own hide pants were. She touched his cock which was getting very hard and she could smell his arousal for her. As the matriarch of the Inuzuka clan, she had a very high level of smell, though she knew her children would soon surpass her soon. Her sense of smell told her that the blonde was truly in full heat, more than enough to make her own body get all the more aroused. She then decided that now was going to be the right time for her to see Naruto fully naked once more. "Now then Naruto-kun, I think it's time we take these clothes off of you." Naruto could only watch as Tsume then did something that really got his body on full alert. She used her teeth to untie the knot there on the lacings that held his pants tight to his waist. As soon as she was done, the Jonin quickly removed his hide pants as well as his sandals, with the sandals being the first to go and then the pants. She smiled as he was now wearing only his boxers. She could already see the slight tent in his boxers and she was not going to waste time as she then removed the last piece of cloth that covered Naruto's full naked form. With that out of the way, Naruto was now completely naked. Tsume licked her lips even more as she looked at Naruto who was now undeniably naked before her, and she was not the least bit disappointed by the sight before her. His lower form was well sculpted and she couldn't help but notice the strength and power there in his form, and she couldn't help but look at his cock which was already getting a bit harder. She wanted to see just how big her lover's cock could get and she knew of only one way that was very effective in getting a rise out of men, namely those who are around Naruto's age. "Now then Naruto-kun, I think it's time that I join you in being exposed." "Tsume-san." Naruto could only gulp as Tsume reached for the sides of her own shirt and removed it from her body, showing the fishnet-style undershirt as well as the short halter-top-style bra that she wore underneath the fishnet shirt. Tsume then took off the short skirt to reveal herself in the same set of undergarments. The older woman then tossed the clothes to Naruto who was surprised by that action as he was blinded by the now discarded clothes that Tsume had just thrown in his direction. He quickly tried to remove them so he could see just what was Tsume doing. He got his answer as Tsume finally removed her bra after removing the rest of her clothes. She was now bare naked before the blonde Jonin. Naruto could only utter one word at this point. Wow. In Naruto's mind, not bad. For a woman who is old enough to be the kid's mother, she's pretty well built. Nice to see human women keep themselves in prime condition. Naruto was utterly stunned at the sight of Tsume being completely naked before him. Tsume's hair was still in the wild disarray that she seemed to favor more than any other style, setting her apart from the other women as well as her daughter Hana. Her face was female indeed and without fierce expression she had on normally. She was no doubt attractive despite the canine-like slits in her eyes and the marks on her face. His gaze moved lower to her body, and he could see that she was very much in perfect physical shape, not a sign of fade anyone on her well-toned and formed body, and if there was any fat on her frame he certainly was not going to have any problem looking her all over to look for it. Her arms were long and slender yet he knew the strength there in them. He moved back to her chest, and saw her breasts which were still full and perfectly formed without a single sign of her age on her body as well as her face. Her breasts were certainly well suited to her frame and height, and their dark red nipples as well as her areoles were certainly enough to make him take notice. His gaze went lower to see the. Tsume then teased him with a smirk on her face as she spoke. "You like what you see Naruto-kun? Yeah, you look beautiful." Tsume then decided to tease her lover a bit. "So despite the fact that I am a lot older than you don't find me ugly?" Naruto shook his head vigorously at that, hoping that he said something that would. Tsume wasted no time as she quickly moved over Naruto and was now naked on top of the blonde Jonin who was as naked as she was now. She looked him over like a female wolf looking over a big juicy meal after a well-timed hunt, or a delicious male to mate with. The Jonin couldn't help herself as she looked at Naruto intense, grinning as she felt his cock begin to react to her own nakedness as she felt it rub on her inner thigh. The Jonin grinned even more at Naruto in a very feral fashion as she leaned down over Naruto, gently kissing him on the lips. Then to his surprise, she licked his cheek slowly, and in such a very erotic way that he groaned out loudly. "Ah!" Tsume moved away as she tasted Naruto's skin once more and spoke to him. You taste nice Naruto-kun." "Tsume-san." The Jonin smiled seductively at him as she began to kiss him once more on the face, starting slowly on his lips, and then increasing the passion in her kiss on him as she now used her tongue to run on his lips once more. As soon as he opened his mouth to her prodding, Tsume wasted no time ravishing Naruto's mouth once again. getting to taste the blonde while moving her hands to his cock. Ah! Naruto moaned into the kiss between him and Tsume as he felt her hands on his cock. This was the first time that any woman had ever touched his cock like this, and he couldn't help but feel very aroused by this as his body moved a bit, making the situation all the more interesting as his body's involuntary actions allowed his cock to move in her hands. Tsume mentally growled in arousal at Naruto's actions as she felt his cock move in her hands. She decided to let him feel all the more pleasure as she moved her hands up and down his cock. She could feel him react as his cock began to get harder and hotter as well. This made her all the more aroused as she continued to kiss the blonde Jinan. As soon as she was done kissing Naruto, she moved away to look at her lover's cock to see if her actions with her hands had helped in making her lover's cock all the more ready for what was to come, and when she saw that it was already at full mast, so she decided that now was the right time for the blonde to have his turn with her. "Alright Naruto-kun, it's your turn, I hope you know what to do." With that, Tsume lay down next to the blonde Jinan as she smiled at Naruto, showing to him that it was indeed his turn to make her cry out in pleasure. The blonde then gave a fox-like grin as he then thought about how to best do these things to the elder woman. He started by moving on top of her. He took the time to study the woman's fully naked form once more before he then began the night by kissing her once more, only this time he was taking his time to get things done right. The kiss started slowly between the two of them and then began to get a lot more passionate while he moved his hands to touch Tsume's breasts. He rubbed his palms on the smooth and firm breasts, making sure that he was going to be able to do it right. As he moved his hands, he looked at Tsume's face as well as listened to her moans to determine just how well he was doing in pleasuring the woman. He could see that she was all right with it so far as she had a gentle expression on her face. Happy that he was doing all right at the moment, the blonde continued with his movements, caressing her breasts as well as her nipples gently, feeling her nipples become harder due to his actions. Not bad Naruto-kun, but you might need to be a bit more forceful. And use your mouth too." Naruto nodded as he did just as Tsume asked of him as he began to be a bit rougher on her breasts as well as her nipples, much to Tsume's approval as she then told him to squeeze her breasts a bit more. Naruto does so, marveling at the softness of her breasts as he felt his fingers move into them more. They felt like firm but soft marshmallows or something like that. He then moved to using his mouth just as Tsume suggested. He started by kissing her nipples, then her areoles, making the woman smile at his actions on her breasts. He then began to use his tongue, slowly licking them, finding the taste to be rather nice to his taste buds as he continued with his actions on Tsume's breasts. He continued to squeeze them gently with his hands as well as massage them to make sure that he was doing the right things to make her happy. His actions were not lost to Tsume as she moaned out to him as well as voice out her approval. "Ah, just like that. Press my breasts like that Naruto-kun. That's it." Naruto then took her breasts into his mouth deeper while moving his tongue more fiercely on Tsume's breasts as well as her nipples, making Tsume all the more happy that he was being a lot more forceful with his actions on her body, and she could tell from Naruto's actions along with the feel of his cock on her thigh, which was at this point very hard. He was soon going to reach his very ill limits. That was when she decided to make her move on Naruto, but for now, she decided to let the blonde make his moves on her. It was not long before the blonde moved his thigh between Tsume's parted legs when he was trying to get to a more comfortable position for him to properly pleasure her breasts, but in doing so, he was able to rub her vagina as well as her clitoris. The result was obvious as Tsume growled out in pleasure at his actions while he in turn was able to feel the juices that were flowing out of her vagina. Tsume decided that this was more than enough for her to make her move as she gripped Naruto's head and gave a fierce yet soft growl for him to stop. The blonde naturally responded and moved away from her breasts, though she could tell that he did so with very obvious reluctance. She herself also wished that they were not going to stop since she was interested in making Naruto do even more things with his mouth and tongue on her breasts. But this was not the time for that, they could do it later. She then spoke to Naruto. "Don't think you did something bad Naruto-kun, you were doing well." "So why?" Tsume growled a bit and gave Naruto a very seductive grin along with a fiercely aroused gleam in her eyes as she replied, "It's time I get to pleasure the rest of you Naruto-kun, get ready for that." With that in mind, the female Jonin was quickly to move and force Naruto off of her. As soon as she did so, she moved him to lie down on their bed as she then was now on top of him. She began her actions by kissing Naruto deeply while she rubbed her breasts as well as her nipples on his chest, making him gasp a bit at her actions. When the kiss ended between the two of them, Tsume began to gently lick and kiss her way to his chest. She did her actions slowly on him, reaching his stomach. Tsume loved the way Naruto would moan as well as shiver with each kiss and lick she made on his body, as this told her that she was doing well in pleasuring the young man, as well as telling her that she still had it in her to pleasure a man the right way. She then reached her lover's cock as she decided to play with Naruto a bit more as she gently ran her breasts along with her nipples on his cock, making Naruto moan out deeply. "Ah, Tsume-san. The Jonin grinned even more at this as she then took hold of Naruto's cock gently in her hands once more as she began to move her hands up and down. However, she was not going to just use her hands as she then placed Naruto's cock between her breasts. She smiled seductively at Naruto when she saw that he was now looking at her as she began to move her breasts back and forth over his cock. Naruto cried out as the feeling of Tsume's breasts all over his cock was something that he had never felt before. He had read about this being done by some women on the men who they were intimate with, as this was prominently featured in the pervy sage's books, and it was called something like breast fucking or something like that. He had no idea if it was as good as the pervy sage made them out to be in his books, but as he experienced it firsthand, he was now sure that the pervy sage was actually right on the money on this one. Ooh! Naruto cried out deeply as he felt Tsume's mouth taking his cock all the way to the base, making him feel like he was going to orgasm right there and then. It took all of his inner willpower not to lose control of himself at that point from all the pleasure that was now flowing in his body due to Tsume's actions. As she moved slowly, licking his cock deeply while sucking on it as well, he couldn't help but reach out to her head, running his hands in her hair as well as her face. He also was more than willing to tell Tsume just how much he appreciated her actions on his cock. Ah, Tsume-san, your tongue. So good, so good. Kami, I feel like I am going to die. Tsume didn't mind that action from Naruto as she continued with her actions on her lover's cock, relishing the heat coming from his cock as well as the taste and hardness as well. It had been years since she had done this, so she was happy that she still had to touch as she could feel the movements of Naruto's cock as she ran her tongue on his cock as well as the base. She also loved the words he spoke, which further told her of the pleasure that she was giving him. The Jonin also took the time to move away from Naruto's cock to also lick his testicles, gently playing with them using her tongue as well as her teeth, gently running her tongue as well as her teeth on his testicles, making the blonde even more aroused at her actions on his sex. Tsume loved this as she was now able to make love to a man and relieve herself of the stress. Added to that fact that Naruto was by heart a good man also made this moment a lot more delicious to her senses. She increased her action on Naruto's cock, making the blonde even more aroused by the second, making her all the more happy at the way that this was going. It was not long before Naruto finally reached his full limits due to the actions of Tsume, and he could only cry out in a full roar of release. Yes, Tsume was more than ready for the meaning of that cry. After all, she had been with men before, so she was no stranger to the events to come. She took in Naruto's very first stream of cum as she kept his cock in her mouth, though she moved back a bit to make some needed room while keeping half of Naruto's length in her mouth. That was a very good move, since after Naruto released the first stream of his cum out of his cock, that was soon followed by a large stream of his cum. The female Jonin eagerly took in all that she could as she found the taste of her lover's cum to be utterly delicious. It was sweet, with some saltiness mixed with a mild hint of spiciness that seemed to excite her, and the fact that it had a clean and pure taste further added to the taste of her lover cum. That told her that he was indeed a pure virgin, making her all the more aroused at the taste of a virgin youth's cum, and that arousal resulted in her vagina releasing more of her juices as she took in gulps of her lover's cum. She was still amazed at how much Naruto was releasing, but it served to make her all the more hungry for more as she took in amounts of his cum. Ooh! Naruto felt like he was being drained dry of all of his energy, which in this case he was as he continued to release more of his cum into Tsume's mouth. He couldn't help but be awed by the fact that she was still taking in all of his cum without showing any discomfort, as well as having a deep red blush on her face as proof to him that she was enjoying this moment with him very much. He felt his body slowly release the tension as he finally began to relax and lie back panting on the bed. Tsume took in the last amount. As soon as she was sure that she didn't waste a single drop of her lover's pure and delicious cum, she moved up and wasted no time in swallowing the cum for Naruto to see. She looked at Naruto and smiled as she could see that the sight of her swallowing his cum without any hesitation was more than enough to get him back on track. She then decided that now was the right time for him to make her happy as well. She helped him sit up. When she was done with that part, she then leaned back and parted her legs, exposing herself to Naruto, allowing him to see the sight of her dripping wet sex, the wetness due to her juices. She then gave Naruto a come here gesture to make him come to her while she spoke to him with a desire for him to give her deep pleasure evident in her voice. Now I think it's your turn, Naruto-kun. Do you want to taste me as much as I tasted you? Tsume-san, are you sure? Of course, you can see my wetness there, right? I want you now. Naruto gulped as he moved towards Tsume's pussy. He couldn't help but be amazed at the sight of it, deep pink and glittering with her juices. There was a rather strong scent there that was a bit musky but not bad that hit his nose, and it also seemed to arouse him to no end. As he got closer, he heard Tsume moan a bit as he blew a bit on the bulb there. He couldn't help himself as he gently licked her vagina's outer lips, hoping that this action would meet Tsume's approval. That moan of pleasure from the female Jonin was more than enough to tell him that he was on the right track. With that in mind, he continued with his actions, slowly licking her vaginal lips as well as her clit, making the woman moan out in approval of his actions. He was able to taste Tsume's juices, finding the taste to be a bit thick but also strong and sweet as well, like some thick and sweet syrup but not the thick kind. It was not the least bit bad in his mind as he willingly took in more of her juices into his mouth. Ah, that's it, Naruto-kun. Play with my clitoris. It's that bulb there. Be gentle with it, alright? Hi. Naruto did as Tsume instructed, and the results of his actions was evident as Tsume cried out more encouragement to him as well as releasing more of her juices for him to taste, making him all the more eager as he sped up his licking on her vagina as well as her clitoris, making her even more aroused. He gently played with the Jonin's clitoris as well. He then got the idea of pushing his tongue in and out of Tsume's vagina, just to see how she would react as well as getting a good taste of her juices. As he did so, his tongue was soon caressed by Tsume's inner walls, making him moan out as he drove his tongue deeper to taste her juices as well as pleasure her. Tsume cried out at this action done to her by Naruto. It was unexpected, but certainly not unwelcome in her mind, as the feeling of her lover's tongue moving in and out of her vagina was something that she had not experienced before in her time, making her happy that Naruto was doing this to her. It was not long before Tsume hit her orgasm and she was more than willing to shout out her pleasure. Naruto-kun. Naruto was able to lap up as much of Tsume's juices as best he could. Some flowed out of his mouth, but he was able to take in as much as he could. The heat and taste of Tsume's juices were more than enough to really get him to full arousal once more as he felt his cock become rock hard while he continued to do his best to take in more of her juices. He could also feel her inner walls move all over his tongue in a very delicious fashion. As soon as he was done, Naruto moved away with Tsume's juices on his mouth. The woman was quick to move despite the fact that she was still being affected by her orgasm. The taste of her own juices mixing with Naruto's own served to get her hot once more. That did the same thing to Naruto as he was now back in full power. With that in mind, the female Jonin moved away at the end of the kiss. Tsume then lay back with her legs parted and she lay down, allowing Naruto to see her vagina soaking wet once more, eager for them to finally end this night the way it is supposed to end. Naruto looked at Tsume, silently asking for permission to do this. She smirked at him playfully and nodded, telling him that she was all right with it, but not before telling him something. Naruto-kun, drive deep into me, don't tease me at all. I want it in me now. Tsume-san. Please, no more rubbing the tip or any of that. We can do that some other time but not now. Drive it deep into me now. Naruto saw that Tsume was dead serious, so he got into position, hoping that he was going to hit the spot dead center. Tsume moaned out deeply as she felt her lover's cock fill her vagina to the brim. It had been some time since she had done this with anyone, so it was not very surprising that she felt some level of discomfort, but that was quick to disappear as she felt her inner walls move to accommodate her lover's sex. The Jonin looked at her lover, noting the looks of great concern on his face. Something wrong, Naruto-kun? Are you alright, Tsume-san? Tsume could see the concern in Naruto's face, and it made her smirk at his thoughtfulness. It was rather endearing to know that he cared for her well-being even though they were already this far out in their actions towards one another. She loved that as most men would care only for their own release and not take time to pleasure women properly. She then spoke to Naruto with a very relaxed voice. I'm fine, it's just been a while since I've done this. Now are you ready, Naruto-kun? Hi. Good. Now move slowly back out. Naruto did just that, and it was not long before Tsume moaned in pleasure at the feel of his cock moving out her vagina slowly. The pleasure flowing through her felt both familiar and new at the same time, showing just how long it had been for her when she had last been in bed with a man. She loved it all as she looked at Naruto was also showing the same pleasure in his face, as this was something that he himself relished, making the woman all the more proud of the fact that she was going to be the one to take his virginity away and no one else. Now, drive it back in. Naruto did that, and the two of them cried out in pleasure at the very same time as he buried himself deeply into her vagina once more to the hilt. Tsume relished the waves of pleasure that flowed through her at that moment as she felt her vaginal sheath being filled to the brim by her lover's cock. It was something that she really loved a great deal. She then nodded to Naruto for him to do that all over again. Naruto did so as he slowly pulled back out and drove himself back into her sex all over again, making him feel the pleasure all over again. He started moving back and forth slowly, making sure that he was able to establish a good movement and rhythm to make sure that he was going to give Tsume the pleasure that she wanted him to give her before the end of the night came. The pleasure for him also grew as he moved in and out of her sex. He also decided to play with Tsume's breasts with his mouth as well as his tongue, sucking and gently licking her breasts, adding more pleasure to the woman's body. Both of them were now moaning out their respective pleasure with each action that they made on one another. Harder. This feels good. Faster. Naruto began to pick up the pace of his movements as he began to thrust his cock faster, harder, and deeper into Tsume's dripping wet vagina, while the results of his actions made Tsume cry out even more, while her body naturally reacted to his actions as more of her juices continued to flow out, as well as her inner walls milking Naruto's cock even more. The blonde Jonin couldn't help but speed up his actions on Tsume's vagina, thrusting faster and deeper into her sex with each thrust of his hips as well as his cock moving in and out of her vagina. Tsume relished this as the memories of the pleasure came back to her, mixing quite easily with the pleasure that she was feeling right now at this moment with each thrust of Naruto's hips, along with the movement of his cock in and out of her sex, along with hearing the sounds of their mating with one another. She loved this deeply. She felt each thrust fill her body to the brim, and it made her all the more happy that she had decided to do this with Naruto. It was not long before the two of them finally reached their respective limits as they kissed one another at that exact moment when the two of them finally reached their orgasm. Tsume felt her inner walls milk her lover's cock as she felt Naruto's cock release the very first stream of cum into her vagina in that moment. The feeling of the hot and thick liquid hitting her inner walls was something that was utterly delicious to her. She moaned as she felt Naruto's cock unleash even more of his cum into her sex. As the hot and thick streams filled her to the brim, the Jonin kissed the blonde deeply while wrapping her arms and legs around the blonde to keep him there as she felt him thrust his cock in and out of her vagina a bit more, sending waves of pleasure to her body despite the fact that those said waves were a bit weaker. Naruto himself felt like he was going to pass out as he moaned into Tsume's mouth in pleasure as he felt his cock fire the first streams of his cum while he felt her inner walls milking his cock deeply, making him feel even more alive as the pleasure moved all over every inch of his body at this exact instant. The feel of her inner walls moving all over his cock as well as the feel of her juices covering his cock from all over was something that was making the blonde Jonin feel like he was in heaven. As soon as that was over, the two parted from one another as Naruto lay down to catch his breath, and Tsume did the very same thing as well as her lover. However, as the two of them parted from one another, they were not going to be satisfied just yet. Only this time, it was not Tsume who started the rest of the night's festivities but the blonde himself as he moved to gently lick the right side of Tsume's face, right where her clan marks were, surprising her a bit at his sudden actions. However, this was just the beginning of Naruto's actions on her as he then moved to caress her breasts a bit with his hands, making her moan a bit more as he began to touch, massage, and squeeze her breasts the way that she wanted him to massage them. All the while he began to kiss and lick her neck. This made Tsume moan deeply in pleasure as Naruto's actions were beginning to get her hot for more. This was given an extra boost when Naruto moved one of his free hands down her body, and he gently played with her vagina as well as her clitoris. That was more than enough to get Tsume fully aroused and eager for another delicious round with her young lover. Naruto-kun, you're very naughty, aren't you? Tsume spoke as she was now on top of Naruto once more as she began to lick and kiss her lover's cock, cleaning it of both his cum as well as her own juices. She made sure to lick her lover's cock clean while relishing the taste of their combined juices. The Jonin licked her lover's cock and testicles clean, then licked her way to his stomach, then to his chest, until she was face to face with him once more and kissed him deeply in that moment. Both lovers moaned into the kiss as they tasted each other in that instant. As soon as the kiss broke, Tsume decided that now was the time for another round as she moved to straddle Naruto's head between her legs, allowing Naruto to see her vagina as well as her clitoris, both of which were still shining from the actions that they had done together with her juices and some traces of his own cum. Tsume wasted no time as she leaned down towards Naruto's cock. She licked the tip slowly first, then the rest of it as well as Naruto's testicles like she had done before. As soon as she was done licking Naruto's cock once more, she wasted no time as she took it deeply into her mouth once more. Naruto moaned at the feel of his cock being in Tsume's mouth once more. The heat and softness there in her mouth might not match the feelings he got from her vagina, but he was certainly not going to complain as he liked the feeling either way. He then decided to pay Tsume back as well as take part in what they were doing as he reached forward with his hands. He then held her hips, allowing him to move to her vagina. As soon as she was close, he licked her vagina's outer lips as well as her clitoris, getting a great deal of moans from the Jonin as she still continued to move her head slowly up and down his cock. Both of them moaned at the pleasure they were giving one another and getting from one another as well. This was something that Naruto had only heard about but never experienced, and it was something that Tsume had been interested to try out for a while. It did her heart good to feel the pleasure flowing all over her body as they continued with their actions, and their moans also served to heighten the pleasure that the two of them were feeling. They carried on with their actions on one another until the two of them finally reached their respective orgasm once more. Tsume was happy to be able to take in more of her lover's cum into her mouth, allowing her to taste the sweet, hot, and thick liquid N equals once more. That made her all the more eager for yet another round of sex with the young blonde ninja. Naruto himself also got to taste Tsume's own juices all over again, The sweet yet slightly sour taste was something that really aroused him as he took in as much of her juices as he could manage while H moved his tongue in and out of her vagina as well as rubbing his tongue on her clitoris. As soon as they were done, the Jonin moved quickly away from Naruto's body, directing her attention her lover's cock as she then began to gently rub her breasts on it once more, making Naruto gasp at the sensations that she had just sent running up and down his body. She was quick to pick up on that as she then moved to face him once more. As soon as she was face to face with him, she kissed him, tasting herself in his mouth while allowing him to taste himself in her mouth at the very same time. The end result for the two of them was an increase of pleasure that flowed all over their bodies in that exact moment as the kiss between the two of them soon began to get a lot more heated as time passed between them. As soon as they stopped kissing one another, the older woman was soon back to her lover's cock as she then moved her hips into position over Naruto's fully hardened cock. As soon as she was ready, she smiled warmly at Naruto as she moved her hips down. Tsume cried out a bit as she felt her outer vaginal lips being parted by the tip of her lover's cock. As soon as she felt half of Naruto's cock being in her, she moved her hips a bit to see what the results would be, and she was not the least bit disappointed as pleasure flowed through her body in that instant. Ah! This feels good. Of course, it was not just Tsume who felt the pleasure. Tsume-san, feels good. Naruto himself felt like he was going to pass out as he felt Tsume move her hips back and forth while half of his cock was deep in her sex, her juices flowing down his cock, all the way to the base of his cock, all the way to his testicles. He couldn't help but feel even more aroused by the sight of the older woman before him, her body covered in sweat, her breasts moving with each breath she took, her face flushed with red along with her clan's markings, and more besides. It was good picture. Tsume grinned at her lover's words and without saying a word, drove herself down quickly, making only one howl of pleasure as she felt herself being filled to the brim by her lover's cock once more, all the way to the base. The woman loved the feel of her inner sheath being full in a moment while she heard Naruto also cry out in pleasure as well as surprise due to her actions on his cock. She looked to see Naruto moaning out loudly, making her even more aroused as she relaxed herself a bit. As soon as she felt relaxed, she moved her hips and she could feel her lover's cock moving in her body. Apart from moving her hips, she also moved her hips up and down, allowing Naruto's cock to be caressed by her vaginal walls as she moved up and down. The results of her actions were more than obvious as she moaned out deeply in pleasure with each rise and fall of her hips as she took Naruto's cock deeply into her vagina with each movement. She naturally was more than willing to cry out in even louder tones the full extent of her pleasure. Ah, Okami. Naruto himself was also in the grip of full pleasure as he felt Tsume's inner walls milk him with more pressure as she moved up and down. He was also given the visual pleasure of seeing the older female Jonin moving up and down on his cock. He could see the blush on her face grow even darker with each rise and fall of her hips as well as seeing her breasts moving up and down with each of her movements. He could also see the glistering beads of sweat on her form as she gave him a great deal of pleasure with her actions. He then reached out with his hands to massage and squeeze her breasts the way she wanted them to be massaged and squeezed by him. This was more than enough to add even more pleasure to the woman as she moaned out her approval as more of her juices were also flowing out of her vagina to coat his cock as well as his testicles in her juices. Both of them relished this moment until they both were hit by the individual orgasm at the very same time. Tsume leaned back as she cried out her full release in that instant while Naruto also leaned his head back and cried out at the very same time. Ah! Tsume felt herself being filled to the brim once more by her lover's cum, and she loved the feeling of being filled to the brim once more. Along with the knowledge that her lover had the stamina to keep this up, she was getting tired, but she felt that she had enough for another round with Naruto. She also hoped that her young lover had enough in the tank for another round with her before he finally reached his limits. She didn't have to worry as Naruto felt that he had more than enough energy for another round with her as he felt his cock unleash more of his cum into Tsume as well as feeling her inner walls milking his cock with full gusto. He felt as if he was going to pass out from the pleasure himself, but managed to hold on and summon his energy back as he then made his move by sitting up to face her, kissing her deeply in the face. Tsume was quick to respond as the two of them were in a deep lip lock at that moment as they touched one another with their hands as well as rubbed their bodies on one another to get their juices back to full ignition even after that earth-shattering orgasm that they both had just experienced only moments before. Once they were fully back on track as Tsume felt to her delight, Naruto's cock being back to full hardness, the blonde now took charge as he made her turn around and lie down on the bed with her supporting herself on her hands and knees. Tsume was no stranger to this position, not in the slightest as she spoke out to her lover. "Go ahead Naruto-kun, do me like this." Naruto was more than happy to do just that as he pulled back out to the point that only the tip of his cock was there. He then drove back deep and fast into Tsume, moving at a good speed and rhythm to drive himself deep, hard, and fast into the woman's dripping wet sex while he then used his hands to touch the rest of her body, from her back to her shoulders, and then to her breasts along with her nipples, further adding pleasure to the woman. Tsume loved this moment as Naruto thrust his cock deep into her sex fast, hard and deep, more than enough to make her feel a lot more alive than anything that she had ever felt before in her life. She loved each hard thrust of her lover's cock into her sex as she moaned out loudly in pleasure at his actions on her. Yes, harder, deeper, faster Naruto-kun. Naruto was more than willing to go at it as she requested as he sped up his thrusts as well as go deeper in his movements as he then began to lavish Tsume's body with kisses on her back as well as her shoulders, making the woman moan out even more in pleasure at his actions on her body. Tsume then turned to face him with her tongue out of her mouth. The blonde wasted no time as he sucked on her tongue, making her moan out loudly. As soon as he was done, he then kissed the woman deeply, making her moan out even louder. It was not long before the two of them finally reached their own respective limits as they once more were hit by their respective orgasm for what seemed to be the last time as they were now too tired to keep going at it. Yes, despite the fact that this was the last time, both enjoyed themselves immensely as they stayed in that same position for a bit longer. Tsume loved the feel of being filled to the brim once more while feeling her lover's cock fire more of his cum into her sex with her inner walls milking him deeply, while Naruto himself relished the feel of Tsume's inner walls caressing and milking him for all he was worth. They stayed that way for a while until Naruto moved away and got the blanket that they had, covering himself and Tsume at that same time. As the two of them finally reached their respective limits, Tsume lay next to Naruto as she gently kissed the young man to sleep. Naruto closed his eyes with a smile on his face while Tsume had the same smile on her own face, happy with the night's events this time as the two of them finally went to sleep. The next day, Tsume moaned a bit and opened her eyes to look about in the camp and she couldn't help but feel some slight aches in her body. She wondered just why she was feeling this way when the memories of what happened last night came back to her mind. She couldn't help but blush slightly at the memories of Naruto's playful aggressiveness as well as his stamina. The older woman knew that what they had done was not something that she was not going to forget anytime soon, nor did she want to. It might have been hormones that drove both of them, but it was too good to be a one-night thing between them. When she did it with Naruto there was a feeling of oneness that she liked, not to mention that Naruto was certainly quite the man when it came to being in bed. He was not perfect in his actions last night, but she didn't mind, they had plenty of time, and besides that, she was a grown woman and quite capable to deal with the possible results of things that would occur at some point in time when they got back to Konoha. Not to mention that while Naruto was at times wary around her, he was not someone to be bullied and pushed around as he was not the kind of man to back down easily. That much she knew for a fact, and it actually made her like him more. Besides, it had been a while for her to be able to feel pleasure again, so she was not going to let it slip past her anytime soon, and Naruto was going to be a real good lover. Plus she could really teach him some good tricks that she herself had been able to use when she was younger when she had the time. As soon as Naruto began to wake up, Tsume wasted no time as she licked his lips gently with her tongue, making the blonde wake up a lot faster, and he looked at her with some level of surprise as she then kissed him deeply. The blonde Naruto responded as he moved his hands forward to touch Tsume's naked form, making the woman moan as he touched her breasts gently with his hands. When the kiss ended, Tsume then spoke to Naruto. You have gotten rather adventurous, Naruto-kun, touching me like that without my express permission." Naruto gulped and replied, "Sorry." Tsume then gently touched his face as she spoke to him. "It's alright, we need to talk a bit, Naruto-kun, about last night." Naruto immediately sat up and faced Tsume as he had a feeling that this was going to happen at some point in time while they were here on the island. He hoped that she was not regretting the time that they had been together, though he was not all that surprised since they had acted on their hormones and it would have been solely on their respective desires. However, Tsume was able to sense this from Naruto by looking only at his facial expressions, so she decided that the best way to help Naruto understand what she had decided on before she had awakened him was to tell him of her decision. "You don't have to worry about me regretting what we did, Naruto-kun, because I don't regret it at all, I rather enjoyed it. What I am trying to say is that I hope that this will not be the last time we do this together in private." Naruto was naturally very surprised by that. He had thought that she was going to say that this was a one-time thing between the two of them. He was not expecting that she was actually willing to continue this between the two of them, and he naturally spoke out to find out why she was willing to do this with him many more times. Why you do?" "Of course I do. You were amazing last night, not that good I'll admit, but a few more times will remedy that. Besides, I've been a bit lonely for a long time. Don't get me wrong though, I love my family deeply and care for their well-being. But being a ninja and a single mother can be hard on a woman's love life. Sure, I could find another man if I wanted, but considering how most men are frightened of my reputation and demand her, then you can guess how hard it would be." "I guess, but why?" "Why do I want you to be the one to keep me company as well as happy in bed, Naruto-kun? It's very simple, you don't get too frightened of me, and you stand up for yourself when the situation calls for it. Plus you are kind as well as considerate of a woman's needs. Most men care only for their own pleasure, you don't. That's a very good trait for a young man, you know. It makes him all the more desirable to a woman, especially to a woman who has not been with a man in a long time. I see, but shouldn't we keep this a secret from the village? I mean. Tsume grinned as she hugged Naruto a bit and replied, I know, I can bet things would be very odd if others found out, but don't worry, I have my ways. Later, Naruto was currently cooking some more of the captured sheep meat in the steamer that he was able to make using soft moss with earth to cook the meat well and keep the moisture of the meat inside of it. There were also several more pieces of the meat being roasted on the other fire that he made and were hanging on prongs to roast. Tsume at the moment was currently washing up in the waterfall away from the camp that they had been able to make weeks before. Tsume's wolf-like canine summon approached Naruto and gave a nudge to the blonde which told him that the wolf-like summon was getting hungry for some meat. Alright. Give me a second here. Naruto turned to get some of the still raw meat and some of the organs. As soon as he did so, he took out a kunai and began to cut out large portions of meat for the massive wolf-like canine summon. As soon as he was done, he spoke to the canine while pointing out the now cut portions to it for it to inspect. Are these portions of food enough for you for today? Kuromaru nodded its approval. Naruto took the portions of the meat and organs and took some of the bones as well for the wolf to chew on and placed them to its eating spot. The wolf growled hungrily and nodded to Naruto its thanks as it dug into the breakfast the blonde had given it for the day. As Naruto checked on the meat, he smiled a bit as the smell of the meat helped him relax a great deal. As soon as the meat was cooked, he took the meat off the steamer, placing the pieces on the wooden plates that they had while doing the same thing to the roasted meat. It was then that the blonde Junon was soon greeted by none other than his demonic resident who seemed to be in the mood to have a conversation with him. So, I take it that last night was worth it? I guess. I had no idea that she knew how to do all that in one night. Ha. I guess the old human saying is right in this case. What old saying? Women are like fine wine. They get better with age, or so it goes, though I can bet that you figured that to be true on your own naked. Naruto blushed at that memory, making the Kyuubi laugh in his head. I made sure that your cum is infertile so she would not get pregnant. Keep in mind that since you've got portions of my chakra in you, she could get pregnant at some point since she is still able to have children. Besides, you have any idea how things would be in Konoha if you got her pregnant? You got a point there, it would be really hard to explain. Good to know that you know the ramifications then Kit, not to mention the fact your friend Kiba would have gone ballistic if you got his mother pregnant. Naruto shuddered at that idea of Kiba finding out that he had not only had sex with his mother but also got her pregnant. He could easily imagine the sheer hell Kiba and Akamaru would put him through, and while he could easily fight back, he couldn't blame Kiba for the reaction either. Good point. The good news is that she was not fertile that night when you two did the deed, so no chance of that happening yet. At any rate, at least she's willing to help you relieve the tension and she does like you Kit, so take all that you can. As for me, I have to go. And where would you be going? Oh, to watch the records, see if I can find any mistakes from last night. I could teach you some better moves as well. You pervert. Ha, see you later lover boy. As soon as that conversation was over, Tsume came back and they were finally able to have a very delicious breakfast. Afterwards, Naruto took a bath, but he was soon joined by Tsume who was more than willing to have a delicious make-out session with him before they moved out to do their routine patrol around the island to make sure that they were able to see any rescue ship that might be in the area. Or any ship for that matter so they could get back to Konoha. Their luck was in for the best however as they were informed by one of Naruto's Kage Bushin that it spotted a ship with one of the telescopes that they had in the Kage Bushin had lit the signal fire before puffing away. As they arrived to the site, they were happy to see that the ship was heading to their direction, and Naruto whooped for joy as he used the telescope that his Kage Bushin had placed down nearby to spot the ship. They were going home. Epilogue. Naruto was currently training in the field in Konoha. It had been a week or so after they had been rescued by the others from the island that they were stranded on and it was great reunion for him to be with his friends once more, as well as seeing Tsume being greeted by both her daughter and her son. After they had been allowed to rest for a while, they spoke to the Hokage on how they were able to survive while on the island that they were in before they were rescued. Of course they had not told Tsunade about what they had done since they both had agreed to keep their actions together a secret. And sure enough they were able to have some private times together as Tsume revealed that she was able to hide their scents due to a special jutsu in the clan that only she knew about and had not taught to both Hana and Kiba. Not even their canine familiars could smell the scent and that allowed the two of them to have all the privacy in the world. He had just finished his run when he sensed that he was being watched. He quickly got on the defensive to try and see just who was trying to sneak towards him. It was then that Naruto was greeted by a voice. Relax Naruto-kun. It's just me. Naruto looked to see none other than Tsume who was wearing a very feral smile on her face as she walked over to him, He wondered just what was going on with her all of a sudden, and it was not long before he got the answer as the female Jonin was before him. She then without warning grabbed him by the collar and dragged him to a more secluded spot in the field, well away from sight and hearing range of anyone. As soon as they got there, she took out several vials that he recognized as scent-masking liquid as well as a pack of special crickets that began to make noise. Those things were more than enough to tell him that what was about to happen was going to be something that was very important. He already had an idea as to what that was, but being the cautious one around Tsume for some time, he was not going to jinx his chances at this point in time. He didn't have to worry at all as Tsume gently kissed him on the lips. He was surprised, but he was also quick to recover as he kissed Tsume back. When they parted, the woman smiled at Naruto and spoke to him very seriously. "How are you doing, Naruto-kun?" I'm fine. Why are you asking?" Tsume grinned and replied as she took out a long bolt of cloth, and before Naruto could react, she was able to tie him up in a knot that was hard to remove. She then pushed him down, and for a brief moment, the blonde was worried. That look on his face served to only excite the woman as she quickly covered his eyes with another piece of cloth. This allowed her to do her thing. As soon as she was done, she removed the shroud covering Naruto's eyes, and Naruto gasped as she was now naked before him. Tsume then made Naruto lie down as she kissed him once more. And when she was done kissing him fiercely, she then spoke to him. "I think it's time for a break, Naruto-kun, and if you behave, I'll let you have your turn." In Naruto's mind, the Kyuubi was laughing out loud at the soon-to-come events that were going to hit his blonde jailer. There might not be a fight at the moment, but considering the rather feral yet passionate way his lover was going at him, then a fight was not going to be enough. As it looked at the soon-to-occur festivities, it was grinning a great deal. "Now this I like.